As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get As Guyana sits on the economic and political crossroads, we speak to the nation's opinion leaders and decision makers to get their views on the challenges the country faces and the path it must take to achieve national development. Welcome to Nation Watch. Now here is your host Mervyn Williams, former member of the Guyana Parliament.
It's Sunday, 17th March 2024. I'm your host, Mervyn Williams, welcoming you to this edition of Nation Watch. Nation Watch is a production of the People's National Congress Reform and comes to you every Sunday, at noon. Today we're going to be discussing Region 10. Region 10 is in focus today. There are a number of issues in Region 10 that we need to get to the attention of our listening and viewing public, and I'll raise a few of them immediately. You will recall that there was a nurses' strike some months ago. You will recall that the government of Guyana took a decision to deny the nurses their pay. Government cut nurses' pay for the days that they were on strike, legitimate industrial action. Nurses were insulted by a particular gentleman who operated on behalf of the government, and the nurses went to court, got a favorable ruling from the High Court, got their income reinstated, and the court ordered the gentleman to apologize to the nurses, which I believe he grudgingly did. The nursing school in Linden was shut down. The government's position, People's Progressive Party's position, was that there were too many nurses in Linden and in Region 10. What did the government do? They voted in this year's budget a sizable sum, hundreds of millions of dollars, to build a nursing school in Region 2. You know which political party holds political control of Region 10. That's the coalition. And of course, the People's Progressive Party holds political sway in Region 2. And there's no amount of reasoning required to understand the basis for this decision. You know that the synthetic track in Linden, Region 10, was started on the coalition government and has been neglected, abandoned by the People's Progressive Party. The bridge linking Wisma to Mackenzie was abandoned by the People's Progressive Party. You know that an entertainment group was awarded a contract to build the Bamia Primary School, which is several months behindhand and no completion in sight. And there are tremendous amounts of issues affecting young people in Linden: unemployment, victimization. And then beyond the town of Linden, there's the road from Linden to Mabura, which was initially abandoned by the government of Guyana, the People's Progressive Party Civic, until, as the locals, as we say in local jargon, pressure bust pipe, and they had to go start working on that project. And in the indigenous communities of Region 10, massive allegations of financial misappropriation, financial impropriety, villages of Hururu, Wikikalkuni, and so on, all sorts of allegations of the absence of accountability and transparency in transactions. Pauline Sukai in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs allegedly turning a blind eye to the reports coming out of these villages, and there's so many other things affecting the lives of people in Linden and further afield in Region 10. It was our intention today to have two guests. Unfortunately, the mayor of the municipality of Linden is battling with some health issues at the moment, and we wish him a very speedy recovery. So unfortunately, he's not with us today, but we do have Mr. Darren Adams, who is the regional chairman of Region 10, and he will be joining me in this conversation. Welcome, Darren, to Nation Watch.
Thank you, Mervyn, and I do hope that I'll be able to, of course, highlight further many of the challenges that we have been experiencing here in the Upper Demerara Berbice region. You have hit the hammer on the nail with your initial remarks. And it is only prudent that we continue, of course, to share with the viewing public how our region, Region 10, our opposition-controlled region, continues to be targeted strategically and intentionally by the government of the day.
Before we get to the meat of our conversation, Darren, viewers who didn't have an opportunity to join the rally either in person or virtually last evening may be very, very curious as to what transpired, what was your attendance like, what was the reaction of the people on the ground to the message from the APNU, and of course, who your principal presenters were.
So we of course, were happy that we were able to have a cost of living / discrimination rally. We were able to highlight the various presenters, were able to highlight to those who were viewing, to a crowd of just over 300 persons, amidst the fact that there were several other activities happening that we did not want to in any way not support. And so there was the Old Students Association that had their event at Silvertown. What I can tell you is that we in no way made it mandatory or compelled anyone that they had to turn up, whether they 10-day workers or anybody. Persons came from as far as Kokwani, Aichuni, and they were listening from Araima, and they came to listen to the views and to the representation that is being made by our elected officials in the National Assembly and at the regional level. Of course, the cost of living took center stage, and many persons, of course, the speakers were able to articulate to the persons attending the challenges faced by our nurses, as you would have highlighted just now, where a judgment was had in their favor, where the judge ruled that their salaries were illegally cut by the ministry, by the government and the Ministry of Health. And of course, the government, rather than pay our healthcare workers who stood with us during the COVID-19 pandemic, they are now taking steps, the government that is, to appeal that case rather than to pay healthcare workers who toiled during those tough times with us. Of course, you made mention of the suspension of the Charles Rosa School of Nursing for Region 10, while training continues in Region 1 to 9. And now we are hearing the very government saying that they will now have to steal nurses. And so all is not well in the Upper Demerara Berbice region. We have seen close to 200 nurses resign and have now returned, and they are finding comfort in an anarchy that we fought so hard against to gain independence from. And so many of our nurses are now going back and finding comfort in an anarchy rather than find comfort in their homeland. After, of course, Forbes Burnham would have fought for independence when we thought we would have been a free and independent nation. Over the past 3 years as well, you would have seen in the health sector, close to 30 doctors resigning from the Linden Hospital complex and the Kokwani Hospital, seeking to go and work in the oil sector and in the mining sector. Imagine our doctors. And so we now have a situation where we had to import doctors and nurses. Soon you will see more nurses coming into the health facilities. And our concern is that there will likely be that language barrier because many of them are coming from Spanish-speaking countries, etc. Of course, the rally focus, as I said, was on the cost of living. We highlighted, as was pointed out in the leaders' 10-point plan for addressing the high cost of living and, of course, poverty, where fair distribution could have been executed or emulated. The government should have established by now an independent body or committee to deal with the cash grants that go to persons who are affected in this high cost of living. Of course, we see them using political appointees and persons connected to them, their friends, families, and favorite. And of course, in the public assistance program, rather than focus on targeted assistance, implement a targeted program that is aimed at supporting our most vulnerable people. They have sought to remove many of our vulnerable people from the public assistance program. It was during the coalition.
There's
that
no surprise
800
here.
people benefited, and they are now removing people from the public assistance program.
This is a national problem that we're having. I've spoken with a number of persons in Region 9, having just returned from there with the opposition leader and team. And the loud cry is that persons who were in fact receiving the social assistance benefit from the government of Guyana under the coalition administration, mostly vulnerable women,
Yeah.
have since lost those benefits. Since the return of the People's Progressive Party, they've lost those benefits. And we know that in Region 10, there have been many cases with persons who are incapable of moving around physically, incapable of working, incapable even of assisting themselves in the simplest of ways, have had their benefits withdrawn. And then when you talk about the person having to appear somewhere in Georgetown before some evaluation team, how does that person get there? The level of discrimination is ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah,
what
it
do you
is. We have been documented cases, and very soon we want to do something, and I don't want to make mention of it now, but we plan to go broader to expose what has been happening. Of course, we would have completed a dossier, and we will likely try to share that with the international community with evidence, of course. Recently in Block 42, we had a case where a 5-year-old boy that has a liver disease was told plainly he will not benefit from the public assistance program. So it has extended, and that was an Indo-Guyanese child, by the way. So not only Afro-Guyanese are being targeted, Amerindians are being targeted, and now poor Indo-Guyanese are being targeted. And those who are perceived to be supporters of the APNU AFC. We would have seen in 2021 the Ministry of Social Protection coming to a community like Region 10 and installing a predominantly Indo-Guyanese board to preside over the public assistance in a community that is predominantly or 80 or 90% Afro-Guyanese. All 8 members of the board at the time were Indo-Guyanese.
The question for me is, where do the members of the board come from? Are they from the community of Region 10, or are they from outside of Region 10?
So a lot of them are from communities in Region 10, but they are people who are connected to the party, who are openly wearing the slogans of the PPP. They are not doing what we did. We had an independent board, yes, and we also accommodated persons even from their party when we were in office. So we had a bipartisan approach in dealing with matters relating to public assistance, and that is how we were able to increase it from 250 to 800.
So
Now
the issue here is that the representation on the board is not reflective of the demographics of the region, and that to me is rather unfortunate, and it clearly is deliberate. And
that is
what is the motive behind such deliberate action is one that we'll have to ponder on. But I want to go a little bit into the health sector here, Darren.
Yeah.
How are residents of Region 10 being affected by the loss of 200 nurses, 30 doctors, and being served by a disillusioned health sector employee staff? I could imagine how those who remain in service to our people feel. The absence of motivation, the absence of drive, and just going on because of the need to serve humanity. In the absence of all of those things and a paucity of resources, how are they coping, and how is that affecting the wider population who seek medical services?
Well, I can say to you it's greatly affecting our people, because the fact that you don't have experienced people in the system, what has been happening now is that persons are forced to leave Region 10 and go to private institution, whether Woodlands or Mercy. And so that is also affecting their ability to access affordable health care within their communities. One would recall that it was under the APNU AFC that we had taken steps to decentralize several services, including the health services. And so that is why we constructed a dialysis center here at the Linden Hospital complex. An eye clinic was established here. I can say to you that all of those things have now deteriorated. And if you look at the average citizen that turns up at the hospital, whether the Upper Demerara or the Linden Hospital for medication, you will see most times a red line drawn through their prescription list for basic medication. So they are now forced to go into their pockets and, of course, to seek these services outside. We are hearing of cases where doctors have been working beyond the call of duty over their expected shifts, collapsing in the theater. And there has been no response by the government to, of course, solve these problems. Right now, there is a outbreak of dengue in our region where several persons are affected. And, you know, because we lack the capacity and because nurses are resigning, doctors are resigning, the healthcare system, in my view, has virtually collapsed. And so it will trickle down, and many of our people will feel the blunt of it because they will now have to find alternative means to either engage with a more competent doctor and at the same time utilizing their meager sums that they have been able to save up, especially our most vulnerable people. At a time like this, our senior citizens, we are supposed to ensure that there are programs and that there's readily available access to health facilities and medication for them. Unfortunately, that is not what is happening here in Region 10. In the Berbice River, the ambulance that we procured during our tenure to straddle the Berbice River has not received any funding for maintenance. And so persons coming out from the Berbice River to visit the Kokwani Hospital and even from Ururu to come to Linden this year, after 4 years of being in government, we would see now they would have acted upon our advice to allocate, to provide an ambulance for the people at Ururu so that that community can have access to the Linden Hospital complex. Within the fourth year in the tenure, we are now being able to provide an ambulance.
Well, we lost your audio there for a bit, Darren, but in the same vein, I'd like to add that it was brought to my attention that the people of Oriala lost their river ambulance to a fire. I gather that the ambulance, the water ambulance for Oriala, was destroyed by fire, but I do not see any official report. I may have missed it, but I have not seen any official report in any of the mainstream media regarding the loss of this particular asset, which is of grave importance to the people of Oriala. Before I shift from the healthcare sector to the education sector briefly, I want to make the point that it is evident that whatever is happening in Region 10, particularly as it relates to the victimization and the withholding of resources and the withholding of technical and financial support to the regional administration of Region 10, it all seems geared specifically to ensure that the elected officials of Region 10 look bad, fail in whatever they do, and so that in the hope of the People's Progressive Party, the people of Region 10 will eventually come around to rejecting the APNU AFC. But I want to say to the People's Progressive Party, programs like these, exposés such as this, will ensure that the people of Region 10, Guyana and Further Field become aware of the realities of Region 10 and other similarly administered regions in this country, and no amount of malpractices, no amount of malintention by the People's Progressive Party exercised at the level of central government will come between the people of Region 10 and their support for the APNU AFC ever. Darren, I want to shift a little bit over to our education system. There was a teacher's strike. Linden was right up there with the rest of the country. Slippers on the ground, no backing down. But even more important, well, not more important, but equally important to the teachers receiving a livable wage, for the teachers being able to exercise their right to collective bargaining, to have meaningful consultations with the government along the lines of collective bargaining. This is a time when Guyana is rolling in wealth. Why can't the government of Guyana pay teachers a living wage? That's the first issue. The second issue is, because Guyana is rolling in wealth, persons who are in the entertainment business and know absolutely squat about construction have been given a mega project to construct the Bamia Primary School in Region 10 and have failed miserably, notwithstanding the volume of resources presented to them, and the school remains incomplete and our children continue to suffer. Why is it on the one hand money is available to pour out to friends, families, and favorites in the construction side of the business, and money is not available to pay our teachers who are molding the minds that will develop this nation? What's happening along the lines of those two issues in your region? I'm not getting your audio at all here, Darren. You may need to exit and come in again, and let's see how quickly we can get that rectified. But viewers, here's the trouble. There's a contention that there's no money to pay teachers. There's a further contention that if you pay teachers and other public servants increases in wages and salary, you will contribute to inflation. But look at the amount of money that is being poured down the gutters when it comes to public infrastructure works, to the detriment of our children.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
So Marvin, as you know, contracts continue and the government continue to only pump billions of dollars into the top 1%, friends, families, and favorite. And so you mentioned our teachers, and I will speak on that shortly. So a contract was awarded to Statement Investment to the tune of $346 million. Mind you, they came in as the second lowest bidder. But despite another company coming in closest to the contractor's estimate, they received this project. This project should have been completed last year, July of last year. They asked for an extension to November. They were granted it. They asked for another extension. And now, to insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people, they have now said that they want an extension to April 4th, which happens to be All Fool's Day, which tells you that these people are not serious about education delivery. Mind you, these projects that they are executing are projects that were concepts of the coalition government. And so while we were able to construct the Christianburg Primary School during our tenure and the Bamia Nursery School, the other projects that were supposed to be completed, which is the Bamia Primary that is currently being done by Statement, and the Wizrock Primary, of course, one expects that when one government does something good, any government that says that it is caring would ensure that those projects they inherited are placed into the hands of a competent contractor. This contractor has received close to $200 and something million, but can't complete this school and has gone past, has not met the deadline that he himself would have given to us. And so we see them finding billions of dollars in the infrastructure. I think education's budget at the national level, education is receiving a meager 2%, while infrastructure is receiving over 50% increase or allocation for 2024. All that needs to happen is, in the case of our teachers who have worked diligently throughout the COVID-19 pandemic in the year 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, is for them to go back to the National Assembly with a supplementary paper and find monies. They have the monies and they must find a way to pay. Now, as you are aware, Statement Investment was entrusted, as I said. They got this project and clearly they are failing and they are receiving coverage because, of course, you know, they are close friends to the government. But it is coming at the expense to over 800 students who are dependent on that school being completed in that catchment area to be able to attend school. Contrast that against the backdrop that these students who are currently attending schools in far communities far away from their homes would have seen the government take steps to take away the boats, the buses, the bicycles. In the case of the Amelia's Ward Bamia, if they had continued with the 5Bs program, we would have seen the cost being cushioned. They have allowed all of the buses to deteriorate, the boats to fall apart, and they have not built upon that program, the 5Bs program that started under the coalition, simply because they want to spite and of course, stop and block all of the sensible policies and programs that were started by the APNU AFC. Now, our teachers, as I said, have been working tirelessly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite repeated attempts to engage in meaningful discussions with the government, the teachers and its union, they would have experienced a total lack of response and commitment to address their grievances. And so as it stands right now, I believe this will now spill over and you will see more support coming from the general public because it has now reached a critical stage, a critical juncture, where any further delays to interact or engage the teachers based on what they have requested will see many of the PTA, the parents and even the other associations that are in support of the teachers coming on board to give support to them. Now, the teachers union has put forward, in my view, a reasonable proposal for an across-the-board increase in salaries as part of their multi-year agreement. And so they are advocating for a 25%, I believe, for 2019, followed by a 20% for the subsequent years, 2020 to 2023. And so these increments are essential with the high rising cost of living and goods and services. It is important that these educators be treated fairly and that they be compensated for their tireless efforts in shaping the future generation of our nation.
The question really is, Darren, how does one explain the availability of resources, financial resources, to large infrastructural projects, while on the other hand, no such resources could be found to pay the teachers? And on the one hand, the argument is that the teachers, if they receive additional emoluments, will contribute to inflation, a rise in inflation. But the same does not apply to these mega projects. So I want to leave that there for a second, though, Darren, and to ask you another question that boggles the mind. Almost half of the national budget, 1.46 trillion Guyana dollars, is dedicated to infrastructure development. 41% of all monies that go into public infrastructure finds itself somewhere else. It means that close to a quarter of the national budget goes someplace where it's not accounted for. Mm-hmm. Against this background and the availability of large sums of money for mega projects, how does one explain government's refusal to complete two very important projects in Region 10, infrastructure projects? One, the bridge connecting Wismar to Mackenzie, and two, the synthetic athletic track. These are critical, one, for transportation, provision of goods and services, medical connections, education, getting farm to market connections on the one hand, and on the other hand, the development of young people and the bringing to full bloom of their talents. And we know that Region 10 produces in this country the largest number of athletes from among the 10 regions. How does one explain the absence of resources for these two crucial projects and the availability to do of same resources to do every little concrete strip across villages in the East Coast and in Berbice and so on?
Because the government is discriminating. They're discriminating against opposition-controlled regions. With one mantra, they preach one Guyana, and they're seeking to suggest to the population that they are creating a one Guyana. But it's one Guyana for their top 1%, friends, families, and favorites, and it's another one Guyana for people who support the APNU, AFC, and the opposition-controlled regions. As I would have indicated, any caring government would have taken those well-structured projects you just mentioned, the synthetic track at Linden, recognizing that Linden is the talent basket for the country. One would have thought that they would have completed that within their first year or first 2 years in government. They have drawn out all of those projects, the bridge across the Demerara River here at Linden, which we did, the feasibility study. Mind you, on the day when our feasibility study was being finalized with KR&S, the company that was doing the road and the bridge, the feasibility study, they sent persons to lock healthcare workers and our patients out from the hospital, thinking that Lindeners would have blocked the bridge and prevent that transformational project from going forward. The public must remember that for 23 years, the PPP did not have any plan. And if you check their manifesto, you will not see anywhere in their 2020 manifesto any talk about a new bridge across the Demerara River here at Linden and at Mackenzie and Wismore. It is the APNU who had placed those projects in their manifesto. And what they are attempting to do now is piggyback on our projects to make it appear as they are the initiators of these projects. They have not carefully planned because this is Region 10. They are not interested in serving our people. All right? They come, they seek to suggest one Guyana, but if you look at all of that I have spoken about, all you are seeing is discrimination, racism, and you're seeing them just picking off a few of the people that are connected to them and enriching their pockets with the wealth. Look at what's happening at the road outside of the Linden Hospital complex. 54 million was spent on that road, and just about a week after, the road started to crumble, and we're experiencing bulging in front of the premier hospital here in Linden. Yet another contract was awarded just a few weeks ago for that road to be resurfaced again for another maybe $60 million. And so do not be fooled. They do not have your interests at heart. And many of the infrastructure projects that you're seeing being executed now, they purposely delayed it. And now, because we're approaching an elections, they're now attempting to make it appear as though they love Linden. I have asked the people of Linden, and I will ask once again, if you can list one transformational project that has occurred from 2020 to now, despite you are hearing of a $1.146 trillion, a budget that is 4 times or 400% more than what the APNU AFC presided over or allocated. Just show me one critical infrastructure project that these folks would have initiated. And I can tell you that there is none.
The level of discrimination seems to know no boundary. I mean, you've just identified, well, we have identified in this conversation that nurses are being discriminated against, teachers are being discriminated against, even our children, our young people, children with the Bamiyan school, young people with the synthetic track, farmers, travelers, loggers, miners with the bridge across the Demerara River there, which needs to be replaced. But there's also discrimination against the elected officials of the region.
Yeah.
Why would central government refuse to approve finances for the rehabilitation of the building that houses the Regional Democratic Council? Why would the government turn a deaf ear to sensible recommendations for the construction of a new complex to house the Regional Democratic Council of Region 10? Why would the government refuse to approve application for financial resources to procure suitable vehicles to be assigned to elected regional officials at the level of chairman and vice chairman for the execution of the duties that they were elected to perform? This has happened before in Region 4 when Clement Corlett was regional chairman. You had an old Nissan Pathfinder breaking down all over the place and people laughing at the PNC because that's the best they could afford, without recognizing that it is a discriminatory, vindictive, ill will, almost demonic regime that seeks to ensure that elected officials of the APNU AFC do not get resources that enables them to carry out their functions. What's happening in these areas, Darren?
Well, it's important to know that while the democratic credentials exist for RDCs and MNTCs, they will only be acted on if you have a government that is not bent on practicing domination and control. Here I have an article from the media, from News Source, where they clearly said that the PPPC government prefers to meet with people who are connected to them and not the elected officials. And so what they have been doing, I believe they still can't recover from the democratic blow they received in the local government elections, where the people of Region 10 rejected them. What they have started to do is to ignore the elected component of the council, the people who over 23,000 people went out and voted for them during the regional and general elections. And they're attempting to appoint persons who are connected to their parties to do their political work for them, clearly ignoring the elected officials who the people would have entrusted the affairs of the RDC, the region, and the municipality Linden to preside over. And so one has to ask themselves the question. Here it is, you have over 100 and something employees working at the RDC, people who are directly reporting to the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development, and by extension, the government. And we're operating in an environment here from 2021, when we resume. COVID is in place. We justify that there is need for a building. But simply, as I said, all of the projects that started under the APNU, these people seem to have a problem with it. So we started the RDC building at Spikeland. The foundation is there. Rather than allocate resources to continue the project so that we can bring all of the departments into one building, they have completely removed it from the budget. And this year again, when we requested 680 million, they of course ignored it completely. And so we were denied the building again. We made representation for a fire station on the Wismar shore, because the only fire station at Linden is on the Mackenzie shore. And recognizing the challenges that we currently have at the bridge, because they delayed the construction of the bridge for 3 years into their tenure, we proposed and we identify land for a fire station. They have refused to construct a fire station here in Linden. We said to them, the farm to market road that we had started in 2016 at Milizide out to the Burbits River would empower our food security, because we visited those communities. We saw agriculture produce spoiling on the ground. Let us continue the project, allocate another 300 million so that we can empower our food security by bringing food from the
We lost Darren there for a minute. I'm just seeing a very interesting article here in the Village Voice, published a short while ago. And the headline says that emigration of more than 150,000 East Indian Guyanese since 2012 explains the PPP voters list machinations and Venezuelan migrant strategy. It is interesting that. Are you back with us, Darren?
Yes.
I was just exploring an article here. Sorry to break your train of thought here for a second.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make this point when we lost you, that there's a newspaper article today in Village Voice which is captioned "Emigration of more than 150 East Indian Guyanese since 2012 explain PPP voters list machinations and Venezuelan migrant strategy." I want to flag that because that's the next question I'm going to come to ask you in a minute as soon as you wrap up the point you were making.
Yes, so as I was saying, and I don't know why all of a sudden we're getting these interruptions with the internet. Of course, when the truth is being fed to the public, the government, of course, will use all avenues to interrupt programs like these. But we are currently faced with a situation where millions of dollars of produce are being spoiled in the Berbice River, watermelon, Belange, you name it, Edos. And rather than put systems in place to complete that road, the government has refused to allocate resources. This year, Region 10's budget was increased by a mere 7%. So do not be fooled. While you will hear of billions of dollars, know that 6 billion out of that money, or out of the 7 billion, has to go to employment, paying of salaries. So do not be fooled with the propaganda. On NCN, the moderator had asked the Honorable Minister of Public Works to indicate what are some of the things that they would have done since coming to office for the Upper Demerara Berbice region. And rather than answer the question straight out, because he did not have an answer, you know what he said? He sought to reflect on the time that Sam Hines was Prime Minister, saying that they kept the bauxite alive and that they built Burnham Drive and that they built the Linden Hospital Complex. So they got to go back 20 years.
This is to the time when Sam Hines was squatting on one of the PNCR 1G seats. Yeah.
You understand? Now, many persons, know that many of the projects that the PPP presided over would have failed. The fiber optic cable is one such that was supposed to pass through Linden. The one laptop per family collapse. The Amila Fall projects collapse. The fall dry up. And so many of the projects that they embarked on would have failed. And so when, as I said, when one government leaves a structure like we did, we always had a plan of transition for continuity. We train persons in ICT and we employ them at the National Data Management. We train young people in patient care assistant program and we employ them at the various health facilities across the region. We trained many of our young people in the Bertram Collins College of the Public Service, over 184, and they were receiving employment here at the RDC and other institutions across the region, government institutions. We ensure that the small business and the agriculture, one agrees that the government and private sector are drivers of economic activity. The two of them must come together to support job creation. And that is why under the APNU AFC, we injected 300 million into the Linden Enterprise Network. When this government came to office, they suspended the funds for LEN. And despite a commitment from the Honorable Ashni Singh, who said that he was going to put a board in place since 2022, they have refused to constitute a board so that Lindeners can have access to that 300 million. But will continue to come and give out a 150 and a 250 to people who are connected to their party, and they are so bold. Rather than hide and do it, they come bold on the camera, candidates who were participating in the local government for them, holding up the check that they received 250, while everybody else in the room are given a 150. And then there's another one of their candidates who hold up a check. They told the people they were going to get 500,000. When they got into the boardroom, they gave everybody else who had genuine businesses that they have the income and expenditure statement, the business registration, all the criteria they have met. Fool them, give them 150, but people who are connected to their party are boasting that they are receiving 500,000. They came here and said that the call center that we renovated to a tune of 119 million, that they were going to put young people in there to do ICT in the call center sector. Right now, if you find 15 people in there, you have a lot, because young people have walked off because they're not being compensated. Yet you will have the Head for Go Invest going on NCN, lying, saying that these young people are receiving 95,000 a month. It is nothing of the sort, and it is mere propaganda.
Darren, this is an interesting question here that has just popped up. The last official figures regarding our population suggest that we're somewhere around 750,000. The last official census that we know of, I think, before the one whose report is not yet out, I think it would have been in 2012. Now, here's this report that says since 2012, more than 150,000 East Indian Guyanese have left Guyana. And some tables are being produced to authenticate the claim made by the headline, which I don't want to get into too many details on that. Now, here's the story. A population of 750,000, emigration of 150,000, that should leave you with what, 650,000? But our voters list is 208,000. While at the same time, our school's population is supposed to be 250,000. I mean, what is required? What kind of magical science is required to reconcile these numbers? If your school population is 250,000, your immigration numbers 150,000, and your voters list is 208,000 from the official population number of 750, which is before the immigration numbers popped up. What does this say for Guyana as a country preparing to go into regional and general elections, particularly at a time where the emphasis seemed to be on importing labor in the medical and construction sectors, largely from Asian countries? And this coincides with the abandonment of the no visa restrictions and the re-implementation of visa restrictions for Haitians traveling to Guyana. Well, what's really happening here, Darren?
Well, clearly they're attempting, I should say, to begin the process of manipulating the voters list in an attempt to, of course, maybe steal the elections. However, we want to put them on notice that the recount that we would have done during the 2020 would have given us a fair indication of the strategy that they would have employed over the years. Now, in that number that you mentioned, let's not forget that there are over 250 students in the school population. And so the list is highly rated, and it needs to be addressed. We are calling on the international community once again to help us in this regard, to pressure the government to do just what the very government had recommended in 2015 when they lost the elections. They had called for a clean voters list. They had called for biometrics. With one hand, you're hearing that they can't clean the list, that it is the responsibility of GCOM to do X, Y, Z. But then you have a situation where GCOM itself is also in this this lackadaisical mood, and they too seem to be allowing this most unfortunate situation to just continue. We will continue to call for a clean voters list. We'll continue to ensure that this time around we have our scrutineers who are much more vigilant at the place of poll, and it will not be business as usual. That is what I will say. It will not be business as usual, right? If they think that they can come and use the same strategy and rig like they did in 2020, where we were able to flag 47 or more boxes where documents were missing from those ballot boxes, statutory documents that should have been in there, it's going to be a whole different game this time around.
This list is padded. This list is overly padded. This is way beyond any person's wildest imagination. When you get these numbers and you put them down, if 250 children are in school, 150,000 people have migrated, 250,000 and 150,000, looks like 400,000 to me. And if your voters list is 708,000, we are talking about a list that would in itself contribute in no insignificant way to a very, very, very corrupt election. So the real question here now is Guyana prepared? Are Guyanese prepared to continue to accept these explanations from the People's Progressive Party as to why the list cannot be cleansed? In this number on the list are people who are known to be dead, who died here or died abroad. If they died here, the records are available to remove them from the list. If they died abroad, it is virtually impossible to establish that these persons in fact died, and it will be very difficult to get them off the list. Why can't Guyana go into house-to-house registration and create a brand new register of registrants from which the official list of electors is extracted? And if that is too much of work, why can't we adopt the proposed biometrics feature to ensure that there's no duplication in voting? I can tell you that if we go biometrics, which we ought to go, the corrupt list will be exposed in such a way that the whole of the GCOM top management and the entire People's Progressive Party government will be embarrassed.
Yeah.
I don't know that the PPP understands what embarrassment means, but they must be. Darren, I want to thank you very much for making yourself available for Nation Watch today. We're completely out of time. And to my brother, Sharma Solomon, I want to say to you that you're in our prayers, and we trust that you recover very, very quickly from the medical condition that is affecting you at the moment. Our prayers are with you. I'm sure the entire Linden, Region 10, and the entire Guyana will have you in our prayers as we go forward. Darren, it's been a pleasure having you on Nation Watch once again. We must do this more often. And I salute you, the organizers, and the attendees of the rally, the High Cost of Living rally last evening in Linden. And I want to say to you that you and your team will do well to continue the very good work that you have been doing over these last few years. Thanks again for joining us in Nation Watch. And to our viewers, thank you. Thank you very much for joining our program and staying with us to the end. Until we meet again, God bless.